Hello Ghostbusters! In this video we are going to talk about appliquing your ghosts into the corner squares for the quilt that has haunted houses and ghosts on it. To get started today you're going to need your 4 purple fabric squares, your strip of white glitter grunge, you're going to need your black fabric, you're going to need your ghost patterns, and there's 2 of them. There's the, I guess this one's flying and this one's floating, but you're going to need both of these. And you're going to need, you have in your kit, this is, it's called Fuse Me. This is fusible web. On one side it's paper, and on the other side it's actually a web-like product that will become sticky when we apply heat. You're going to, you only have a long strip of that, okay? The first things you are going to do is trace. You're going to take your paper back Fuse Me, and you're going to lay your ghost behind it, and you're going to trace. If you cannot see this, you can use a light box, or you can go take some masking tape and stick this on a window and hold this up over it, and it shouldn't be hard to see at all, okay? On to one, you're going to trace the outline of the ghost, so you should end up with a piece that looks like this, and you need 2 of this shape and 2 of the other shape of the ghost outlines. And then on a smaller piece, or your leftovers of your Fuse Me, you're going to trace 4 sets of faces. So you're going to trace 8 eyes and 4 mouths. And you'll notice that the 2 ghosts have different mouths, so however you can use it exactly like it is on your pattern. You can mix it up a little bit, however you want to do that. But you're going to need 8 eyes and 4 mouths, okay? And you're going to trace those again on a different piece of Fuse Me than you're going to trace your ghost outlines. Once you have traced everything, you want to cut it out so that you don't want to cut on the lines that you made. You want to cut around them. But you also want to cut in the approximate shape of your object, because it just saves fabric a little bit. Once you have done this, what you are going to do is go to your iron, and you want to use a very hot iron, and you don't want to use steam on your iron. If you use steam on your iron, what can end up happening is you might get puckers in your fabric and in your fusible web. You're going to take your iron and you're going to press. I'm going to grab a pressing cloth real quick. You can use a, yes, you're going to lay the ghost, you're going to lay the fusible web side, not your paper side, onto the wrong side of your fabric, okay? For a pressing mat, and the reason you want to use a pressing mat is in case there's any fusible web sticking out around the sides of your object here, it'll stick to your iron and make a big mess. We have oven liners. These are fiberglass oven liners. You can use one of these. You can also just use another piece of fabric. But now what you're going to do is put your iron on here, and you're going to push and you're going to hold. And you do want to apply some pressure to it because it will fuse faster. Okay? You're going to move it around, and you're going to stick this guy down. Your eyes go really fast. And then once we have this side, we'll flip it over and we'll press on the other side as well. So now what I will do, and you can see it actually stuck a little bit over here, so the pressing mat was worth it. We'll keep the pressing mat between our sticky stuff and our pressing mat, and now we'll give it a press from the top as well. And what this does is it just gets your iron, I think it gets your iron just a little bit closer to your fusible. and it will hopefully melt anything that didn't get stuck down on the other side. And again, we're continuing to apply pressure. And then it's really hot, but we just kind of check and see, is it stuck down everywhere? Got a spot right here. So then, once it is, you've got all 4 ghosts pressed onto your white. Now what you're going to do is you're going to cut your ghost out. Okay, now you're going to cut on the line that you drew, and then you will have this. And then you have this guy. Okay? Once we've got him, now we will, after we've cut on the line that we drew, now we're going to peel the paper off so that we can stick him down onto our purple square. If you pull your purple squares out of the bag and they have wrinkles in them, if you try to stick your ghost onto that, you're going to end up with puckers and all kinds of trouble. So if you pull your fabric out and it looks like this, you want to iron out your wrinkles before you stick the ghost down. So I've got one that I already pressed here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to stick the ghost down. We're going to fuse the ghost to the backing. If you want, you can fuse them all, or here I can turn it. You can fuse them all straight up and down, and you can make them all very nice and neat, like little soldier ghosts. I actually don't think ghosts work like that. I think they kind of end up floating around and, you know. So I have been making my ghosts all at different angles. Okay? So now the same thing, we're going to fuse our ghost down. And this doesn't have any sticky sticking off of it anymore. So we're just going to stick him the same way we applied the Fuse Me to the back of the white glitter grunge. We're going to apply heat and pressure. And stick him down. You can already see it's fusing really nice. There's a lot of different products out there that do the same thing that Fuse Me does. We like Fuse Me because it's very, very thin and it doesn't add a whole lot of bulk, so your quilts will still be drapey and soft. There's a lot of other products that they don't end up with your quilt being quite as drapey, and they make your needle kind of gummy when you're appliquing. Okay, once our ghost is stuck down, now we have to go to our machine and we have to set up our machine for applique. So we're going to do that first before we grab our ghost. All right, for applique, you need your satin stitch foot on your machine. The satin stitch foot has a nice open hole here, and we're going to do, your needle is going to go both forward and side to side. So you need to have your satin stitch foot on there that'll allow your needle to move both ways. If you have a machine where you can change your needle plates, you need to make sure you have your satin stitch needle plate on there as well, or you're going to get your needle, you're going to get your thread, you're going to sew your ghost to the machine is what would end up happening. So you're going to start there. You also, if you have trouble with your machine at all, you can also switch to a smaller needle. This is a 14, but you can switch to a 12 if that would make things easier. Up here, you want to block off your cut button so you cannot use it, because we're going to raise and lower our presser foot a lot, and we don't want to end up accidentally hitting the cut button. I also use needle up, needle down a lot when I'm appliquing. So over here, we need to pick the first thing I'm going to do is select the button that will allow our needle to stay down and our presser foot to raise up. Not all machines have this function, but if yours does, this is when it was meant to be used. What it will do is anytime you take your foot off the foot pedal, you will end with your needle down and your foot up, which allows you to pivot very easily. I need an applique stitch. We prefer blanket stitches for applique. I've been using this one. You'll see that it's got 3 lines going up and down and 2 to the side. There. 3 lines up and down and 2 to the side. That means your needle is going to go 1, 2, 3, and then it's going to go in and out. That's showing you the number of times the needle is going to move. You can use something like this. What this is going to do is only put 1 stitch between your the bites in and out. I like the look of the 3 stitches, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and use. The other places you need to be concerned are your stitch width, which is down here, and your stitch length. Length is going to be the distance between the bites in and out, and width is going to be how far in and out it takes a bite into your ghost. Wow, whoever took a bite of a ghost before. So I actually I've done all of my ghosts so far with the default settings here. I will change it when I do the eyes, but for the ghost, I like the default settings. Now, we always have to think about where we're going to start and end when you're going to applique. I never start on the most intricate parts of the object, which to me is down here. There's curves and a couple of little points. So I like to start in a place where I'm either going to start with a gentle curve or a nice straight line, because what you have to do when you applique is learn the pattern of the needle so that you can learn how to go around corners and curves. So I'm going to start up here, and I'm going to start by lowering my needle. Before I lower my presser foot, I lower my needle so I can look under here and see that it's going to go down directly on the spot where the white fabric meets the purple fabric. So then I'm going to lower my presser foot, and I'm going to make sure that the next time the needle moves, it's going to move close to, again, to the purple and the white fabric. So I'm going to start going. I always move my speed down just a little bit because I go slow when I applique. It's going to take a couple of stitches to lock your needle in place, or your stitches, and it's going to go forward, back, forward, in, out, forward, back, forward, in, out. I did forget to tell them about long tails. So we're going to pretend there's something really bad happened, and oops, my needle messed up, because every once in a while you do have to rip out applique. It's not hard to do. And I'm going to rip that out later, but I wanted to show you something. You want to start with long tails. This is why we don't want to use our cut button. So I've got a nice long tail on top, and because I just used my cut button, I've got a short one underneath. So I'm going to lower and raise my needle once, and if I pull on this thread, it should make my bobbin thread pop up. And now there's a small loop under here. So I'm going to grab a seam ripper and pull the loop and get my bobbin thread, and I'm going to grab it and I'm going to pull it. So I start out with 2 long threads. The reason I'm doing that is because I have to anchor my threads later. I'm going to have to tie knots. The other thing I forgot to tell you was I have been appliquing these ghosts with different thread than usual. I've been using embroidery thread because it's really shiny. See how nice and shiny that black thread is? This is 100% polyester thread. We sell it in the shop. It's $3.99 a spool. You can use regular Aurifil or Superior thread. You want to use a color that matches something. I obviously am not going to outline my ghosts with black. I would either use purple, that's the color of the background, but I'm using white, the color of the ghost, because I want to enhance the color of the ghost, not the color of the background. I'm going to use black later. I just have regular thread in the bobbin, and that's fine. If you have trouble with tension, then you might want to consider either the same thread in the bobbin, or you might need a pre-wound bobbin fill, which we sell pre-wound onto bobbins here. So we have that for you. but I'll just use a plain white bobbin through the whole thing. Okay, so now that I've got my nice long threads all ready to go here, I'm going to start a little bit beyond what I already did. I'm going to lower my needle using my hand wheel and drop my presser foot. And now I have to be prepared for anything because I don't know where I ended in my stitch pattern, so it might take a bite or it might go forward. We're going to see what it does here. Oh, it somehow, oh, because I hit the cut button. It knew I was starting over. Okay, so 3 stitches and then it takes a bite in. 1, 2, 3. And it's important to know what your machine is going to do because that's how you can gauge exactly what you want to do when you're going around curves and corners. So you can see it's been going straight, but now I'm starting to notice I'm going straight and my ghost is going to curve here. So what do I do when I start to curve? Well, I'm going to go until I know it's not, the next stitches I take aren't going to end up where I want them to, and then I'm going to stop. And see, my presser foot raises up. And then I'm just going to turn my fabric a little bit so that it will continue with my needle. My needle is taking the straight stitches right along the line between the white fabric and the purple fabric. And I know that you're supposed to line your fabric up with something on the presser foot somewhere, but the truth is most of the time I'm watching where my needle is landing and how it's landing, and then I can stop. Whoops, I need to go forward one more. So that I can adjust. So now I'm heading into a gentle curve. This one's not a scary circle curve. And I can do this one of 2 ways. I can just keep going, and about the time I know there we go, I can turn. I can just adjust my fabric, or once you start to get a little bit more comfortable with your machine, you can leave this hand here and just put a little bit of pressure on the side of your fabric and curve it this way. Most people, and most of the time me included, are just going to have both hands on their fabric and they're watching where their needle is going, and then when they, see, I mistimed that because I was talking. And then we just adjust it. You just turn your fabric. If you're doing a curve, you generally can take about 3 stitches before you need to stop and adjust. Okay, so we're going to get to a corner. Corners, I think, are the hardest part of applique. So when we get to a corner, what you don't want to do is stitch beyond the corner. If you stitch beyond the corner, it's really, really obvious. So what we're going to do is we're going to go slow around the corner, and we're going to try to negotiate the forward stitches and the bites in so that nothing ends up into our purple fabric, because what I find happens most often is my stitches somehow end up in my purple fabric and then I've got a big mess. So what I'm going to do is go, this next stitch I know something is going to happen. So I'm going to take forward and back, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm going to turn so that when it takes the bite in, I know it's going to take the bite in onto the white fabric. And now, I'm kind of peeking, I'm going to take my next forward stitches over the corner, and then I'm going to turn my ghost so that it takes the bite into the white fabric and stop. And now I'm going to turn again. sometimes you end up on a corner with your bites into the ghost, covering the bites that were along the side. That's okay, as long as you don't end up with your bites on the purple fabric or anything way far off the ghost. You're in good shape. Okay, so now we're into these curves. And these curves, I'm going to take, in general, 3 stitches with a bite, and then I'm going to stop and turn. What I don't want to happen, it's okay. Hold on, cameraman needs a drink. Yep. Okay, so we're just gonna negotiate these curves slowly. Whenever it looks like if I take a stitch forward, I'll be too far away from the white. That's when I want to stop and turn the corner, or turn my fabric a little bit. These ghosts, everything on them is pretty gentle. So it's really a pretty easy, as long as you go slow, it's a pretty easy thing to do. If you are doing this and you're getting puckers or you're getting wrinkling on any part of the fabric, the purple fabric near your ghost, or if you flip it over and you've got a lot of wrinkling within the ghost shape itself, what you want is, you might need a stabilizer. And usually what that is, it's almost like a, we sell it in the shop. You can buy, it's called cutaway stabilizer. No, we want tearaway for this. You'd want tearaway for this. Cutaway you have to cut, and you wouldn't need to do that here. You just need medium weight tearaway stabilizer, and it's basically just a piece of specialized paper that you put behind your ghost to offer some stability while you're stitching. If what's happening in the case where you're getting wrinkling is that your feed dogs are grabbing too hard, I think. I'm not. But the stabilizer will prevent that from happening. It gives your feed dog something else to grab onto. Okay, so you're just going to go around the whole ghost like this. It's going to take a little while. And you're going to do that on all 4 ghosts. And then, so I'm going to finish this up and be back in just a minute and show you the eyes, because the eyes you need to change a few things. Okay? Okay, we're coming into the home stretch. I only have about 1 inch of stitching left to go. So there is something I did as I was coming around this curve. Before I came around it, I flipped this over and I found my big long tail that I started with, and I pulled it down to the bottom because I want it to stay down here, okay? And this guy I'm going to keep off to the side. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to finish up, and what I want to do, and what I always do, is I overlap by 1 stitch. So I'm actually going to go over my stitching here just to sort of anchor everything in place. So I'm going to keep going, and then as I get towards the end, I'm going to overlap my beginning stitching by 1 stitch. Okay, now I got to be careful here so I know. Okay, the next stitch is gonna go over my previous stitching. So I'm gonna go over it, and you can take a bite in or you don't have to. Now, again, this is why I put tape over my cut button. I don't want to cut my threads. I want nice long threads. So I'm gonna raise my needle up, I'm gonna pull this away, and I'm gonna leave myself another nice long tail and cut my threads either with my thread cutter or with a pair of snips. Now I've got nice long tails from the beginning and from the end. Grab a seam ripper. We're not going to rip any stitches out. What you're going to do is that last stitch that you overlapped with, you're going to pull up a little bit, and you should start to see.
I'm trying to do it on the wrong side.
Yeah, I do want to do it on the wrong side. You want to flip this over. Like, why can't I see? Because you're doing it the wrong way. And we're going to take and tug and see one of these guys should bring up. Okay, when I did that, do you see the loop that popped out? There's a loop. When I pulled back, it popped this loop out. That's actually the loop from your top thread. So I'm gonna carefully put my seam ripper in here and pull back just gently so I get my top thread through. Now, there's been some debate here today about what to do with this other thread. This other thread is trapped under stitching, and when I can pull it out from under the stitching, but when I do that, this thread is already anchored, okay? So there are machines that will not anchor the thread at the beginning. My old machine at home would never do that. So in that case, you're going to do the same thing and pull your thread through to the back. In this case, this guy is still hanging out here on top, and we're going to worry about him in a minute.
Okay, if your machine doesn't anchor it, and you know it doesn't anchor it, like Megan said her old machine didn't, then sew a distance, begin and sew a distance maybe to the other side of the ghost, and at that point come back and do what Megan just did with her ending thread. Do that with your beginning thread, and then pull them both to the wrong side. That way they'll already be pulled to the wrong side before you stitch over them as you end.
In other words, when you're here,
Yes.
all the way on the opposite side of the ghost,
Yes.
stop, don't cut your threads, don't take the ghost off the machine, leave him there. But grab your seam ripper and come over here and pull this top thread through to the back, just like I did with these other two threads, okay? And then you can finish up appliquing your ghost. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna tie some knots. We're gonna take our threads, and I've got two in this hand and one in this hand. And I'm gonna tie one knot, and I'm gonna tie another knot. And the second knot, I'm actually gonna pull it through once and loop it around and pull it through twice. That's a hand work trick, and it will make your knot nice and tight. Then I grab a hand sewing needle with a nice big eye. Can you see that? Okay, and I'm gonna put all three threads through the needle, all three threads through. If you're bored, you can say that 3 times fast. I'm gonna put all three threads through the needle, and then those of you who've done cross stitching are familiar with this. What I'm gonna do is take these threads and run them under all these lines of stitching and pull them through. The reason we do this is because if those threads come loose at all, we don't want there to be short little tails on your knot. We want the knot tails to be long, because otherwise the knot will undo itself quite easily. This way they're long tails and they're underneath all of that stitching. Then we're gonna go grab this guy who's on the top. I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna thread this guy through the needle. Thread it through, and then I'm just gonna poke him down through the stitching. If I can find a hole where the stitches go through, I will. And I'm gonna pull this to the back, and then I'm gonna do the same thing. Run it under my stitches, and then I will trim it off. Okay? So that's how you are going to finish the ends of all of your top stitching. And see how pretty he looks? or she. Could be a girl ghost. I think most girls go to heaven though. It's only the boy ghosts who are trapped. Okay, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our ghost face, our two eyes, and our mouth. And we're gonna figure out how we want that arranged. Kind of like that guy. This is the same, the Fuse Me was applied to the black the same way as it was to the white. I'm just gonna do the whole face at the same time. I got the eyes and the mouth. And it really doesn't take very long. It's surprising if you press hard. Okay, that's on there. So now to do the eyes, I'm gonna change a few things on my machine. The first thing I'm gonna do is change my thread because I don't wanna fuse the eyes on there with white thread. So I'm gonna quickly change to black thread while I tell you that if you don't like the look of the blanket stitch on the ghost, and the blanket stitch is any stitch that has a stitch along the outside and a bite in. If you don't like the look of that, you can use other stitches on your machine. You can just use a plain zigzag stitch. That works very nicely, and you can play with the width of that and with the length, which will the width will make your zigzag go further onto your ghost, and the length will make the zigzag either more open or more closed. The other options are you could use a decorative stitch that's on your machine. There are lots of people out there who use a satin stitch to do this. We don't like a satin stitch most of the time because the satin stitch gets so close together that it's not uncommon for it to get stuck on your presser foot or punch the fabric down into your bobbin area. So we don't usually use a satin stitch. People with embroidery machines almost exclusively use a satin stitch. I just realized I still have a white bobbin in my machine and I need to grab a black bobbin. So let me just run right over there and grab one, and then we will talk about changing the stitch width and stitch length on your machine. Okay, when I am doing the eyes of the ghost, I shorten my stitch width, and I write down what I use because that way, if I don't do all the eyes on the same day, I know what it was I was doing. And on my other ghosts, what I have done is the stitch width, I lower it to 2.5. So you'll see right here. Let's see right. There. You'll see right here, I'm going to lower that to 2.5. Except I'm not doing the right dial. And my stitch length, I lowered to 2.2. So the stitch length, you'll see what it's doing is it's making the distance, it's changing the distance between the bites in on the ghost. So like I said, I made that smaller. And the stitch width, what it will do is it changes how big the bite goes into the ghost. So that one, I had a 2.5. Okay, the reason I've made both of these smaller is that the eyes are much smaller an object than the whole ghost was. And if we are trying to do circles, having a real long stitch length, so the distance between your stitches, you have a lot more control if you make it smaller. Okay, I'm going to do this the same way I did it on the ghost. I'm going to start with long tails. Again, the way to do that is to have a long top thread, put your needle down and your needle up, and then you give a tug, and it makes your bottom thread pop up, your bobbin thread. You stick your seam ripper under there, you can grab it. Then you just grab and pull. So you have two nice long tails here, okay? I put my little ghosty on here, and I lower my needle. I'm looking at the distance, I'm looking here underneath my presser foot to make sure that I've got my needle dropped directly on the line. Here. See, the needle is going in right between the white and the black. It's right on that line, okay? So I lower my presser foot, and then I'm gonna go here. And you'll see it's smaller. Now, okay, so that time my machine did not seem to realize I was starting over. So what we just talked about happened. I did not lock my initial stitches. So when I get to the other side of the eye, I'm gonna have to stop and pull my thread up. I do the eyes really slow, and I know it can be a little painful to watch, but okay, and I go about 3 whole stitches, and then I stop and I turn. And actually I'm gonna stop here and turn, because I can see that if my needle goes forward, I would have landed right out in the middle of the white. Okay, I'm at a good spot. I have enough room over here. I'm gonna reach around back, and I'm gonna find my thread, and I'm gonna pull. And I can see there's a teeny tiny little loop there. Okay, can you see that little baby loop? So I can reach in with my seam ripper, and I can put my seam ripper in there, and I pull, and my top thread comes through to the back. And then what I'm gonna do is make sure these guys are all the way this way, so that when I come around, I don't sew over them, because sewing over them is kind of a pain. If you mess up and you end up stitching off into the white of the ghost face, don't be afraid of the ghost. It'll be okay. At worst, what you do is you take it out, you cut your threads, take your ghost off, and just rip out everything you did, which depends on how far you are. The other option is don't rip anything, stop, raise your needle, raise your presser foot and pull yourself nice long tails, and then just pick the stitches out slowly, and then tie your threads off and bury them the way we just talked about when we were ending the white threads, okay? And then you'll just, again, start off with nice long tails, and you just start where you left off and keep going, and just tie knots in all the threads at the end and run them under your stitching lines. Whoops. if you need help with any of this, we're here. You can always just bring your ghosties with nice long tails and come see us, and we'll help you. We'll show you about burying threads and pulling up loops. Circles require patience, but I think they're easier than corners. Okay, so we're getting very close to the end. And what I'm gonna do is overlap my stitches by 1 stitch and stop. And I'm gonna raise my needle, and my presser foot's already up, and I'm gonna pull myself nice long tails and cut them. And then I'll show you one more time about pulling up your loops. It would help if I'd stop putting the seam ripper away. When you pull back, you can see there's a little baby loop there. You're just gonna pull it, okay? And now I've got 2 sets of threads. You can tie 2 separate knots if you want to. You can tie a knot with these and a knot with these, or you can just knot them all. Because all we're trying to do is stop them from pulling out. And again, I've been doing this at home. Pull it through once, loop it around, pull it through twice. And it's a very secure knot. Okay. Then you can do them one at a time, or if you've got a needle with a nice big eye, you can sometimes do everybody at once. I got everybody but one guy. That's okay. So now we thread them through, pull them. We got to go back and get the straggler. Whoop. There we go. And then we're just going to trim our threads. Okay? And you're going to do that to both eyes and the mouth. All right? And then you're going to do that to all 4 ghosts. And then you're going to go on to the video about the haunted house. Good luck, you guys. If you have any problems, just give us a call.